For me, it always comes back to the individuals and the families. I really do this work for my belief in them, the talents, the capability that they have. And I'm really fortunate, over the 10 years of being involved with the Transition Academy, over 70 graduates from that program, to think about how many firsts we have in that program. It could be someone's first paycheck, their first time riding the bus or the light rail, their first date, their first engagement, their first time living away from home for an extended amount of time. But additionally, too, maybe their first time missing their bus stop or leaving their backpack on the light rail. And so I think, there are all of these natural opportunities that so many of us get to experience where we really learn and, we become more capable.
Hello, and welcome back to Finding Common Ground with Heather and Steve. Today we have a guest from Arizona. Brad is going to let us know about the way his state does transition. It's a topic that Steve and I have kind of dissected on different shows, but before we jump into that, Steve, I thought we could tell our audience a little bit about the new spinoffs that we're doing from this main podcast.
Yeah, hi, Brad. Nice to see you. I'll learn a little bit more about you shortly. We have a new website that we are working on, and we're going to be continuing to put content on it. If you guys want to take a look at it, the fcgadvocacy.org. But we also have some spinoffs, and the spinoffs are off of our podcast that we're running right now under Finding Common Ground. We have some solo projects. Mine is called Dadability. It's more to address the dads and hopefully get more dads involved in the advocacy part of this. And Heather's got one for Motherload, which is another fantastic side thing that we can do that's gearing more towards the moms.
Love it, because there's so many conversations for us to have, right? And sometimes people dial in depending on, what their focus is. So I think this is a fun new way for us to start the new year. So Brad, I'm going to back it up a few months, and I was in Arizona and I had flown out for the symposium with first place, and it was such a great experience. So I just want to start there to let people know that there's an organization in Arizona and Phoenix that is where I visited it when I went, and I was really taken by it. I just felt like there were so many great ideas and synergy going on. And one of the things I keep repeating are that there are so many people at the table. The governor, the mayor, the medical facilities, the universities are all really part of your programming at first place. So why don't you start by just letting people know what brought you there? What has made you want to serve this population?
Sure. And thank you for the opportunity, Heather and Steve, to be here today. So I'm Brad Herron-Valenzuela, and I'm First Place's Global Leadership Institute, our Director of Education and Training, and the Managing Director for one of our residential program offerings here at First Place, which is our Transition Academy. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But back to your question, Heather, of really what has driven me here is the innovation, exactly what you were talking about, and to work in a city, in a state that's open to collaboration, that is open to really trying some innovative and pioneering things, not necessarily waiting for someone else to do that or for all of the pieces to be aligned, but to be really adventurous and try some of these programmings like residential options or a partnership with our sister nonprofit or clinical provider. So I know that sort of innovation and that space isn't for everyone, but it's really what keeps me in my job, is to really reach some of these underserved needs, places, individuals. It's really exciting, really what keeps me in my job.
Yeah, I bet. Steve, when we were talking, I was going to say, I could see you want to hop in because Steve's really in a lot of different spaces and has a lot of different focuses, but housing was why I was there. I was wondering what you think of that, Steve.
Yeah, Brad, I think it's great that you're on the show, and you came to the right spot because we are extremely out of the box. We aren't waiting. We always say we're the cavalry. We're not waiting for the cavalry. I think a lot of times people rely too much on state and government and everything else trying to get things done. And we just go out and do it. We find ways to make things happen and just do it. So I appreciate the fact that you're working on this particular thing. Housing's not just important in Arizona. We're having a crisis in New York. It's going to probably get worse. So we're looking at options on that. And I'm so interested in listening to what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. So Heather, Steve, maybe providing a little overview on First Place and also our Global Leadership Institute. So First Place is a supportive housing option for individuals with autism and other neurodiversities. We're located here in Central Phoenix, not far from public transportation, from lots of other quality of life opportunities, from internships, volunteering, employment, the arts district. So we have two different residential options or two different ways that individuals can live here at First Place. And I'll break it down and kind of talk about each of those. The first would be our apartment or resident program. These are studio 1 and 2 bedroom units, and these are typically 1 and 2 year leases. For now, this is a private pay only option. And Heather, Steve, I'll make sure to share some links for your audience members to link back to all of this information. But for now, that's a private pay option. And you can find more information in those links. But like you were alluding to, Steve, we're not waiting for this. We do have some other research and some pilot programmings looking at ways to use some supplemental funding to offset that private pay cost. We're in round 2 of a longitudinal study with ESU, Arizona State University, to look at utilizing some supplemental funding for a few pilot individuals to offset that cost. So bear with us as we've done with our Transition Academy, and I'll talk about, our hope is to really let the data do the talking for these participants, to really look at the efficacy of our programming, to look at the outcomes for these folks, and then hopefully take that data back to some of our legislators to say, this is an effective approach and there should be additional coverage for supportive housing. So stay tuned for that, and definitely more information on our apartment program in link. Our Transition Academy program is our other residential program here at First Place. And this is a 2-year, again, residential program for adults with autism. This particular program is co-run with our sister nonprofit, the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center. SARC is the clinical provider, and they have been around for close to 30 years in the greater Phoenix area and expanding in the next 3 to 5 years, really across our state. I previously worked for SARC. My background is in special education and applied behavior analysis. So I did a lot of clinical work, really across the lifespan, but primarily with adolescents and adults. Again, doing some innovative programming, some life skills classes, some job coaching, sort of the seeds for what became our Transition Academy program. So in this particular option, individuals live in a 4-bedroom apartment. So we have 8 individuals in a cohort. And that apartment configuration is really intentional. We want folks to have opportunities, whether they never have another roommate again, but we want individuals to have opportunities to live with others, to understand, the roommate pairings and how to get along with your roommate, and establishing house rules. But essentially, the Transition Academy has 2 main components, and one is the direct teaching of a curriculum that we developed in conjunction with the Transition Academy called Learn for Independence. So this is a 32 course or 8 courses a semester life skills curriculum. We do license the curriculum to about 15 other organizations across North America, but it's sort of this direct teaching component for all of those skills needed to live independently. So everything from relationships, including dating, sex and sexuality, finances, planning for the future, organization, and executive functioning. So there's that direct teaching component. And then on a weekly basis, there's anywhere from about 25 to 40 clinical hours that are provided by SARC. Those can be a mix of one-to-one and small group, but that's basically the opportunity for all those concepts, all those things that you're learning in the classroom, to be able to apply those in community-based settings, either, again, out in our community, on the community college campus where we teach those courses, or back here at First Place. So it's really sort of that one-to-one of doing some direct teaching and some critical thinking, and then that clinical provider coming alongside folks to really, allow them to practice or demonstrate fluency in those different skill areas. And then those individuals can come back here to First Place, where we have about 50 other residents that live here. And there's a lot of intentionality for both of these groups, the apartment residents and the Transition Academy apartments participants, to interact with each other. So one of the other big things that we do here at First Place is community life events. So each and every day, different activities based on skill development, life and leisure, health and wellness. And again, those are opportunities for folks to do all of those things, interact with each other. But those are taking place throughout our property, through our building and some of our amenities. And we do have really unique and intentional amenities here. So we have things like a barbecue grill and a pool and a gym. But then we also have things like a Lego lounge. Or reading lounges or a video game room. So really the spaces that are going to entice people to get out of their apartments and into those spaces, interacting with each other. Again, having all of these daily opportunities to practice all those social skills, relationship skills. That particular program, by contrast, where the apartments are right now private pay, that particular program can utilize insurance funding. And so, Heather, back to your question and sort of adage there, that this has been a journey and a process for us. When we started the Transition Academy 10 years ago, it was a private pay option only. However, as is with the apartment programs, was never our intention for it to just be that. But we had to, in those initial cohorts, have some of the data to then take to our Division of Developmental Disabilities to do a pilot study for 2 individuals, allowing them to offset some of the cost to participate in our program, but really hoping that they had better outcomes versus the services they were receiving through the state. And they did. They had really great outcomes, living independently, graduating from college. And while that partnership didn't ultimately continue due to kind of reimbursement rates, it did open the door to insurance funding. So both now public and private insurance can cover the clinical portions of that Transition Academy program. And
That's an amazing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say that's an amazing win. That's an amazing win because
Yeah.
we love the idea of the intentional teaching with those opportunities to do it in real life. Because what I can say as a parent and a professional, our kids don't always naturally just develop the skills that we think we would. If we plop them in an apartment and there's these spaces, we think that they're just going to find their way. Like a lot of neurotypical people might just like figure it out as they go. What we've really found is this group just doesn't, right? They really need the intentional part and walking them through different steps and how to approach people. But then the cool part, because I got to tour the building, are these spaces like to do art and cook together and eat together and just Mario Kart championships, were going on when I was there. It was intense. There's a spa meditation area. It's really felt like a cruise ship in a way because how when you're on a cruise ship, there's just everything you need, like all the different ideas. So a space where you can feel comfortable. And I think when we step back and we think about the country as a whole, you have a beautiful model. What do you think, Steve? I mean, I've told you some of this already, but
Yeah, yeah, Brad. Look, if you'd come at this with it just being private pay, that is great because we have people. I know people that can private pay, that will private pay for all the services for their profound autistic kid. But there's also many others that can't do that. So I'm glad that you guys are looking into the supplemental part and realizing that you've got to find a way. We have self-direction here that can help with some of those things here. I'm sure you guys probably have something similar you guys can tap into, but I think that model is necessary. The private pay, of course, but also the model for those that can't. We're all going to need help down the road. And my son's 35, autistic. So I'm looking at a model that works for him, but that model also might not work for one of my friends' kids who's autistic too. So I like the fact that you're looking at it a couple different ways.
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah, I was gonna say, Brad, too, when we talked earlier, it might help the audience to like walk through somebody who's really well suited for a program like this. And then
Sure.
maybe the participant that you're looking at in the future and saying, now that we know how to do this, we're going to do that, so.
Yeah, definitely glad to share more on that. And so what I'll say, just to clarify our 2 program options, is that apartment option you can understand that the difference there is the supports that we provide are about 0 to 10 in their non-clinical hours. So still focused on similar things for independent living, but just not as intensive and not as supportive. The Transition Academy, like I said, by contrast, it's at 25 to 40 clinical hours. There would be a treatment plan that's developed, goals, data, et cetera. And so for either one of those participants, though, we do have criteria that we're looking at, and I'll include that in the link. But it's important to understand at first place, we don't provide transportation, we don't provide meals, we don't dole out medication, but we'll provide the support for developing those skills. Likewise, there are many, many safety features throughout the building, interior, exterior, badge access. There is 24/7 concierge, but there's not a curfew at first place. And that's really intentional for those opportunities, that reasonable risk, that dignity of risk of living at first place. It's really that opportunity to get some, in some cases, intensive support for independent living, but then to have the autonomy, the agency to be able to practice it and to maybe sometimes, make some mistakes. I think in our Transition Academy, and that's really what we look to teach to, is to that fluency of not only can you do these skills in isolation, but can you complete the skill when things go wrong? Can you problem solve? Can you adapt? Can you link multiple skills together? So, and Heather, I'm glad to go a little bit deeper on the criteria for either one of those, but for the sake of time, I can also just provide a link.
Yeah, no, that works. And I think that as family, we're used to doing things one way. When you live at our house, there are rules and we're naturally protective, right? We don't want
Mm.
our loved ones to make a mistake sometimes even, even though that's like a natural consequence. And it's really important for learning. So as a mom, I love the idea that some of those little kinks and quirks and stuff that they have to figure out gets done in a safe place, but you're not being too protective. You're not like making it so clinical that there's no way you could ever make a mistake because that's just part of the process, I would think. So that feels good to me. And it's like a higher education experience that a lot of us have in college, right? Where, I was out partying last night or hanging out with friends, and now how am I going to ever pass this test, that I had to take today? So it's a good way to live in the real world, but not feel like you're throwing your kid off the deep end, right? They can wear the swimmies. You guys could be the floaties for them.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. We want parents to to still maintain a strong relationship with their family member. What we want to provide some feedback and some direction as to what we're working on and how parents can make sure to maintain that independence and not inadvertently derail things by, if someone blows up their budget of providing more money or going home on the weekend and not bringing your laundry with you or sending you home with groceries. So really looking for those opportunities for that sustained independence.
But at the end of the day, when they're done with this 32 course curriculum, you guys have a really good idea what works and what doesn't work for the person. I'm really jealous. Like, I just don't feel like our state has something comparable. And the assessments that we're doing are kind of artificial because they're done in a classroom setting, a program setting. The person's not living there. So it's really hard to tell what a person would do until they try it. And I think
Yeah.
that families will find that their child, their loved one is capable of a lot more than they thought when they're placed in this kind of situation. I bet a lot of them want to go move over to the apartment afterwards, right? Like they want to
Yeah.
continue that experience, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the benefit of having the partnership with SARC, with the Southwest Autism Research and Resource Center, is in many cases, some of our participants have received services from SARC for a long time. So we have a track record with those individuals. In some cases, the Transition Academy has been sort of the next goal or the end goal. And then in some cases, folks, develop the skills so that they don't need something as intensive as the Transition Academy. But that being said, on average for our Transition Academy, about 40% of our participants are from out of state. And so we're seeing folks, from all over. As you mentioned, unfortunately right now aren't a lot of great transition programs like this. So We've worked really hard in our clinical determination process. SARC has done a lot of work in that treatment planning for those goals that we're going to work on, which are really informed by self-determination. But yeah, we're proud of the over the 10 years of our program, really the progress we've made for efficacy, for opportunities for self-determination and agency with our individuals.
And when you think about when it started and what seemed most important then, like sometimes you have an idea, a story in your head about what the problems are going to be and what you had to focus on. Has that shifted in the last 10 years, would you say?
I think no, I think I'll speak about it in a few different regards. So when we started the Transition Academy, this was before First Place was open. So First Place opened in 2018. We started the Transition Academy in 2015. So our first 3 years of the Transition Academy program, we had our students co-located at a property that served seniors. And so this was really intentional. There's about 30 years of research that went into the development of First Place. And again, I'll share some of those links, Heather, but it was really intentional to co-locate our participants with seniors. We had seen other models around the United States of those sort of symbiotic relationships. But I would say really the most important thing to us was to have an inclusive program. We didn't want this to be clinical. We wanted all those natural opportunities, and we wanted those interactions between our participants and the seniors, the property manager, and this property needed to be located, in the community near our community college partner. We've been fortunate too, talking about the inclusive elements to the coursework that we teach is not done in a clinical setting. It's done at a community college. And so just that opportunity to just each and every day to leave the property and to go to the community college that presents so many natural sort of spontaneous incidental learning opportunities for getting your bus pass, orienting to public transportation, keeping your things safe, budgeting. And so likewise, our community college partner, while these are non-degree or non-credit seeking coursework, folks can take additional coursework at the community college. And again, it's just often the catalyst for so many other inclusive opportunities. After you finish courses, heading over to a medical appointment or doing your grocery shopping or doing some sort of life and leisure event. So that inclusive element, wanting to be really embedded in our community, hasn't changed. But what I will say has changed over time, Heather, is sort of our idea and our dedication to self-determination. I think, to be honest, when we started the program, it was really our hope and maybe to some degree our intention that success had to look like everyone, 100% of everyone living independently, living on their own and paying for everything, 100% themselves and having a full-time job. And, again, even in the neurotypical world, I can reflect back on myself, my first few forays into independent living and work, like they weren't perfect. So I think we really refocus things back to that self-determination piece and wanting to hear from individuals and families as to what goals were most critical for them, what was success going to look like for them, and really developing that from the start of that sort of end goal in mind of what are the things you want to accomplish, where are you even considering living after you graduate from the program, and then being committed to that self-determination throughout the progress. We understand if things change or shift, maybe it's your focus might shift from working a full-time job to working a part-time job, but maybe taking one or two classes. That's what I would say would be the big shift is success really looks like helping someone reach those self-determined goals.
Oh, and that's what it should be, right? That was it. That goes back to that whole part where we kind of have an idea in our head of what it's supposed to look like. I know Steve's son got to go to a college campus. That was a very positive experience for him. My daughter had the opposite college experience. She thought she was going to take classes, but they really were there to do pre-employment kind of skill building that didn't really match her. So Steve, you still do like a scholarship, right? With your son's name or something along those lines because you want
Yeah.
more people to have that experience.
Yeah, the ARC in our area, the ARC of Oneida Lewis collaborated with Mohawk Valley Community College here, and they developed an IDD/autism college here, a 2-year certificate program. And one of the downfalls is, transportation is a huge barrier. They didn't allow any of that. They would teach you how to get on the bus and do all that kind of part of it, but the problem is we're rural, and I had to bring my son back and forth for the 2 years period. They didn't have Uber back then and all that kind of stuff, so we didn't have a lot of options. So I decided to help, going paying forward, and my son has a scholarship that we give out every year that pays for transportation for an incoming freshman, and that
Awesome.
hopefully makes it a lot easier for somebody to offset some of the costs of what I had to go through way back. With the point being, it's a great program. My son had a lot of benefit, but again, it's not because others that can't go to that particular program, they don't fit, or the program doesn't match their needs. Haven't experienced that, so it's kind of why we need a hybrid model of everything. Think.
Right. And once you have one model that works, then you can adapt it for other populations and other complexities. One of the things, and you're saying Uber, Steve, they have Waymo in Arizona. And if nobody's heard of that, it's a driverless car that it was really neat to see it in action because people who would be pretty restricted in where they're going, maybe somebody with a visual impairment or somebody who was deaf, they could do everything on the app in a way that's modified for them to use it. And then the car pulls up, they can get to go where they need to go. They can get passes for that. I thought I was a little nervous if I'm being totally honest, but it looked like it was way safer than sometimes it could be. When you have a driver that doesn't know what they're doing. So it was a neat option. And I love that came to Arizona because of the work you guys are doing. They wanted to trial it in a state that was really progressive and forward thinking. So that, I mean, Arizona's what the most autism friendly city, Phoenix in the world, they said. So I can see why people are coming to you guys. And if the audience is listening right now and you're thinking, what could I do in my backyard, like at my local university or with the providers in my area? Do you have any suggestions? Because you talked about that, the licensure program or the certification, because you don't have to live in Arizona to have the benefit of this program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say too, even for us at First Place, it's not really our intention to have a First Place in every city or state. We know, like I mentioned, about 30 years of research went into First Place, and that we are serving a certain profile of kind of resident participants. So we're not for everyone. However, there are some products and services that we can offer through First Place, things like our housing market analyses, which really walk like-minded organizations and folks through a similar process that we did at First Place to think about how might you fund this, what other funding mechanisms are there, what would you want your residential options to look like, what are some of your transportation maybe challenges. So that's one thing that we offer. We do offer direct consultation as well for maybe you have some of the elements, but how do you pull those together? And then there are, I think, lots of opportunities as well through our Global Leadership Institute Symposium, Heather, that you attended. There's a lot of stuff that I won't be able to, for the sake of time, be able to get to today. But we have an employment readiness program that we've rolled out here locally and we'll be looking to do nationally. We have health and wellness initiative. So I would say feel free to reach out to me for any of those opportunities. Some of those, again, would be for a cost, and then others are completely free. So we love collaborating. We understand how much work there is to do in this space, and even with close to 60 residents here at First Place, that's still just a drop. So we are lifelong learners. We're very collaborative here at First Place. Lots of different research going on with local, national universities and other organizations. So reach out. We're very collaborative.
One of the cool things at the symposium too is the research. I tell people I'm not into numbers, but I guess I kind of am. I just don't know how to like analyze them once we have them, right? So, but once I hear about the trends and they went into all these different parts of, what makes somebody successful and as an adult and what kind of things are crucial for those experiences. And when you can put a marker on that and you can measure it, that's one of my takeaways. And so if you're listening and you're thinking about it, we do so many amazing things for people but we don't always measure how it helps. And if we want insurance companies to pay for things, or if we want the government to tweak a regulation to make something easier for more people to access, we have to have the data. And the housing analysis was a huge undertaking. I did that through Autism Up. I helped spearhead that. And whoa, it was a lot, but it was wonderful. I mean, over 500 people have participated. We really got an idea of what our region wants and what they desperately need. So many people are lonely, the families and the loved ones. So we have a little bit of time left, and I'm just thinking, what are the parts of First Place that touch your heart, like the personal stories, if you're allowed to share? Because I think that's what our audience connects with when they feel like, oh, that's just like my son Jimmy, or that's just like that young man that I worked with, a couple years back. So if you don't mind
Yeah.
personalizing it a little.
So I think in addition to being able to do such innovative stuff and to really try things that maybe others haven't, for me, it always comes back to the individuals and the families. I really do this work for my belief in them, the talents, the capability that they have. And I'm really fortunate, over the 10 years of being involved with the Transition Academy, over 70 graduates from that program, to think about how many firsts we have in that program. It could be someone's first paycheck, their first time riding the bus or the light rail, their first date, their first engagement, their first time living away from home for an extended amount of time. But additionally, too, maybe their first time missing their bus stop or leaving their backpack on the light rail. And so I think, there are all of these natural opportunities that so many of us get to experience where we really learn and, we become more capable. So many firsts for me to reflect back on, and then to also be able to look longitudinally. I'll share some of this information, but we did a 10-year longitudinal study between First Place SARC and Arizona State University, looking at the sort of maintained skills over time of some of our Transition Academy graduates. But again, great to connect with some of those people and hear that they're still thriving. Some of them are living on their own, some are working full time, some have graduated from college, some are engaged to be married. And then the big takeaway from that study as well is that our graduates, as compared to similar peers, are 5.5 times more likely to live independently. But other gains with regard to social communication, relationships, quality of life, satisfaction with life. So just again, knowing that I'm part of, providing all those opportunities to individuals and just really seeing them thrive within the community.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Brad, I had a question for you.
Yeah.
I'm looking at housing for a lot of reasons for my son down the road and others. And what I'm doing is I'm going out there looking at a whole bunch of different models and kind of cherry picking what I think is going to be best that fits my son, the ones I'm working with. When did you copy existing systems when you first started, or did you have to cherry pick or reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. So I'll share that report. We have a Place in the World report in Opening Doors, which will really give a much deeper dive, Steve, into some of those processes that we took place. But yeah, that 30 years of research, really the first step of that was auditing some other programs for, specific autism programs or, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But looking at some of those models out there, like I mentioned, when we started the Transition Academy, that was one of those approaches to co-locate seniors with neurodiverse individuals. There were models looking at leveraging some of those state supplemental services. So yeah, I think we definitely took inspiration from many, many other places. But I think, again, always coming back to this idea that we wanted folks to have that opportunity to live here independently, with support and with those community life opportunities. So yeah.
And when we say live independently, I feel like I just have to break that down because that used to throw me off. I have a daughter that's very complicated, and then I have three other children who are maybe not as complicated, but still need support. And when I hear live independently, there's this part of me that always thinks, oh, they can't live independently. But what you're saying is outside the family home with the right supports, with if they have staffing needs and things like that, with the right menu of options, living independently means I can be outside my family home and still be safe and happy and living a meaningful life. So when we think of that, um, then it starts to feel a little more doable. I don't but in the beginning, the idea of everybody having a 40-hour a week job and, being completely, like, really robustly independent, that's always maybe a goal, but it won't fit every situation. Are there certain people that you're looking at now and you're saying, "Down the road, this is a group that we want to focus on"? And the reason I ask is in Rochester, our housing analysis really focused on the complex. And then in Ohio, I know they were looking at Down syndrome. So I know you guys are there research wise. You're looking at these more involved populations and thinking, what can we do for them? So I just wondered if, as we're finishing up the show, we could hit on that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. And let me clarify if I didn't make it clear earlier. In our apartment program, that is, you don't have to have any formal diagnosis to be part of our apartment program. We do have individuals with autism, Down syndrome, intellectual and developmental, diagnoses. Transition Academy, again, is specifically for folks with autism. And I would say in each of those groups, the breadth of who we serve there continues to grow. In our Transition Academy, our clinical determination process is a little bit more involved. While we don't do any cognitive testing, we do want to make sure that people can be safe and can be successful in the classroom. But what I really think over time in either one of those programs is really, again, our ability to serve a wider swath of our population. So maybe individuals who, on both ends of the spectrum, who have had more or less opportunity to live independently, maybe even when it comes to communication, more or less verbally fluent. So I think I would hope just, again, that breadth of who we can serve, but still doing it in a safe and effective way.
I'm really happy to hear that as a mom of a complex mama or a complex little girl. I just always think like all these things always sound so wonderful. And then I'm like, but how could that work for Devin? And I know for you, Steve, Dustin has really, this is something that the family should hear too. In the last 15 years, he's made tremendous progress at home and with the things that you guys are doing. He's different than he was when he finished school. So some of that naturally happens, but yeah.
Yeah, he actually was listed when you first diagnosed as profound autism, and I'm not so sure he's profound anymore. We do therapeutic foster care here, Brad, and we've adopted several kids with autism, another with another disability, and this last one is profound autism. We're going to have to look for a housing model for him down the road. We're elderly, so we're gonna need some place for him to go down, like I said, down the road that fits his needs. But like Heather said, my son changed over time, but I think it's because of the supports that were wrapped around him, the really nice initiatives that helped him along the way, and certainly our home here. But combination of a lot of people collaborating to get him in a much better place, and we hope that's the same case with the child that he's 17 that we just adopted.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Yeah, I was just gonna say, as we widen the scope of who we're serving, I think it does come back to that, Steve. We do have to coordinate care, and that's a really complicated thing. I think if we look at our folks who maybe don't make it through our Transition Academy program, we often see that sometimes it's some of those other co-occurring conditions. So we've really learned from that, and we've really found that it's imperative to have that coordination of care. We're very specific and focused in the services and the expertise that we have and we provide. If that's outside of our scope, in order to accept someone, we might look for that coordination of care with a mental health care provider or whatever those other needs are. But we've seen really, really good success whenever we can coordinate that and we can cross collaborate with other approaches and providers.
Yeah,
And
that's
the technology is really important too. That was so neat to me that like my daughter has seizures where she stops breathing. So right now, the way that's dealt with at school, an RN is attached to her. The RN needs to be able to give her medication immediately. And when we're home, we have home care workers that are attached to her an arm's length away. But when I think of the future, just like a year or 2 years down the line, and I think there's got to be some technology that won't replace the person completely, but maybe she has something on her wrist that actually measures when she's going to have a seizure, or gives her the medication like a diabetic with a pump. Like, I always think that we got to be almost there, because she would love to have 5 minutes where someone wasn't looking at her. I always think what a hard burden that is for her, to never be alone, to never have time with herself. And so, as the audience is winding up on this episode and thinking about all this great stuff, I just think that we have a lot on the horizon, and organizations like First Place that are actually putting that data together and analyzing it for us. Everybody who's looked at intentional communities, and maybe your state's blocking that, look at the newest report that came out, because there's a whole section on intentional communities, and that nobody wants it to be congregate living and all disability. But if you have a neighborhood or a community that's a good choice, then we talk about everybody should have that choice to live somewhere where they feel supported and be around the people who they're comfortable with. So I just want to thank First Place for doing that legwork, for getting that out there and putting on such a great symposium every year where you're bringing people from all over the world to the same table to talk about it, because it was such a unique experience. Denise Resnick, who founded First Place, I want to be her when I grow up. I like just adore her. I think she's an amazing person. Toyosi, Desiree, Avery, you have such a good team, and that can be duplicated in other states.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just, give you a little sunshine, even though you guys are already so much warmer than Rochester. Guys, before we started recording, Brad said they're in the 80s today. And, winter on our side of the country is a little colder, a little jelly, but that's okay.
Well, I would just invite all of your listeners, if you're ever in the Phoenix area or you need an excuse to travel to Phoenix or out west, feel free to reach out to us. We're glad to provide tours. We do think seeing is really believing, getting to feel the property, interact with some of our residents. We welcome all of you to reach out and take a tour. We do offer virtual tours as well. So keep in touch.
That sounds like a great next step for people. And if once we post this and you guys see it, if you have questions, you can reach out directly to Brad, but feel free to interact on our platforms too. Let's get the conversations going, because, connecting with other parents in other states and figuring out what everybody's doing, this is the time we really have to bring our communities together. So thank you, Brad. And I hope that everybody stays warm, unless you're already in the 80s.
Pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity to share with you.
Nice to meet you, Brad.
Likewise.
Until next time.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.